What is up, Effie Nation? Happy Tuesday. I am very happy to be joined by Steve Pimental once again on our live stream. John has off for tonight. He's off at the Bruins game. Not a big hockey guy,
Again
but
on our live.
happy for him. I know he's a Boston sports nut. Steve, what is going on, my man? Welcome to the live stream, baby.
Thanks for having me. So we're talking baseball today, right?
Yes, baseball, football, a little bit of boxing, and then we'll get to basketball later.
Sounds
Cool with
good.
that? All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna talk basketball. Everyone knows we start off injuries, we start off Vegas totals. So I'll just run down the quick list. Injuries, I'll do Vegas, and then I'll pop it over to Steve for a special announcement. So Jeremy Lamb will play tonight. Dennis Schroeder was started at questionable, currently game time decision. Gary Harris is questionable. Marvin Bagley, second day of back-to-back, ruled out. Iman Shumpert ruled out. Darren Collison and Corey Joseph are going to be game time decisions while Miles Turner is out. So Domantas Sabonis, core play. Kevin Huerter downgraded from probable to questionable. Devin Booker is still listed as doubtful. Still hasn't been official yet. So earlier in the day, we found out Otto Porter there was going to be no restrictions, but Washington just recently came out and said that he's going to be on a 30-minute restriction. Take that for what it is. Coaches don't always tell the truth these days in terms of minutes. And Matthew Dellavedova is playing tonight. That kind of kills any Cleveland backcourt value that may have been there. JJ Redick is out. We know Furkan Korkmaz is going to be starting in place of him. Danny Green ruled out. We just got that news. And CJ Miles also doubtful. So some value opening up in Toronto. Let's hop it over to Vegas, where the first game of the night, 7:05. One of the first two games, 228 total in Washington, Philly. Only 7.5 point favorites. So the JJ Redick news moved the line at 1.5. That's nice for anyone considering guys like Bradley Beal in a cash game format. That game should stay relatively close throughout. Indiana Cleveland 208, 9 point favorites for Indiana. 1.5 point downgrade with Miles Turner being ruled out. 228.5 in Atlanta Toronto, 14 point spread. So Vegas predicting a blowout there. Denver, Miami, 210, 1.5 point favorites for Miami at home. 228.5 in Minnesota, Oklahoma City. That is up 4 points since the start of since when Vegas first released their lines. That's a big move. That game is really exciting. I think the two of the best three plays are in that game. Sacramento, Phoenix, also 228, 3.5 point favorites. Sacramento is on the road. Second night of a back-to-back for Sacramento on the road. But we did see a lot of their starters have limited minutes last night, so they should be fresh coming into this one, and you don't necessarily need to be too fresh when going up against Phoenix. They are not very good. New York Golden State, 232. The spread has moved, Steve. It is lowered from 17.5 to 16.5. Huge move. Two football scores. Golden State still favored there. And the second late night hammer we have is Charlotte, LA Clippers, 230.5, 6.5 point spread. So we have some huge totals on the board here. We have, not really a ton of low totals. I mean, Indiana, Cleveland, 208, but it's not, they could be a lot worse. So before we hop in to position by position, Steve, why don't you give the people what they are waiting for?
Will do. Tired of trying to win on big daily fantasy sites? Well, our friends at Prize Picks created the simplest and fastest daily fantasy game. Simply choose over or under correctly on a player's fantasy point projection to win. It's that easy. Just over or under. That's all you have to do. No competing against thousands of pros. No finding minimum value players to fit into your salary cap, even though that's kind of the fun part of tonight's slate. But you don't have to do that on Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, it's you against projections. Prize Picks is daily fantasy simplified. And just to add to that, I'm actually going to write a weekly Prize Picks article for
Cool.
Fantasy Alarm. So every Monday, keep an eye out for that. I will make picks and give you pointers, help you out with strategy on the site and that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Awesome. I'm very excited for that article. Basketball specific,
Yes,
obviously for right now, basketball, and then possibly into baseball, or are we just basketball for now?
basketball basketball's the focus for now.
Right,
I'll let
right.
other people focus on baseball.
All right, got it. I'm excited for that article. You guys should be too. Let's hop over into the slate. 8 games to break down, 5 positions to break down. Let's just start right at point guard, Russell Westbrook. He's my top play of the slate. Do you agree, or are you leaning somewhere else?
I'm not necessarily leaning someplace else. I just like him better for GPP.
Okay.
I know he's been a little bit more consistent now, but it feels like he either makes 4 shots or he makes 12 shots. And I just, there's the risk he goes super cold again and just makes me a little nervous.
I guess the one thing I will come back to you with you saying about the shot attempts. I mean, so last game he shot 9 of 23. We get 63 fantasy points. 3 games ago against Lakers, 3 of 20. We get 60. So yes, I agree to an extent. Just imagine he makes 10 of 20 or
Yeah.
12 of 23. We're getting 80-point upside. So
Uh,
I like Westbrook as my top play. But moving down the list, I think there are some pivots. I think Steph Curry in tournaments we can look at, specifically tournaments. Don't get
mhm.
crazy and play him in cash. 16.5 point spread. It's literally a football, it's worse than a football spread. So don't get crazy. Knicks on a back-to-back. You don't need to do anything psychotic playing Curry in cash. I think then the next two guys are very interesting. Ben Simmons, Kemba Walker. I don't think Simmons necessarily gets any boost with Redick off the floor because it might actually hurt him because a lot of Simmons' assists comes off Redick curls. And
Hmm.
Furkan Korkmaz and Landry Shamet aren't as good of shooters or as good of, role guys as JJ Redick. That's why JJ Redick averages 17 points a game. What are your thoughts on Simmons and Kemba? I love Kemba tonight, personally. And it's a really good way to get exposure to that late night game, which I think, is always nice to have because, you're sitting in the middle of the pack and then you have a guy go for 60 and then it's like you're skyrocketing through the ranks. What are your thoughts on Simmons and Walker? Would you play him in all formats, cash games, GPP? What are your thoughts, Steve?
I like them both. I lean Kemba Walker for all the reasons you mentioned. Just a pace up game. I kind of like the pick and roll with him and Biombo a little bit. But I would not blame anyone for playing Simmons, but of the two, I'd pick Kemba, and that's probably where I'm going in cash games tonight.
Cool. Well, that makes sense because you're not going to play. You're going to probably play Embiid from what it sounds like in cash. True.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I understand that completely. I mean, you're going to have a lot less owned Kemba than you are Russell Westbrook. So I mean, I understand it completely. Going down, I think Kyle Lowry is okay. I don't have like a strong take on him. I think this game could get out of hand really fast, and with the injury bug that he's kind of been going through, I think he could get pulled pretty fast if this game does get out of hand. So I think GPP's only. I like De'Aaron Fox. I think
Hmm.
De'Aaron Fox is in a pretty good bounce back spot. I mean, he looked really good last night. He just didn't play minutes. I mean, 36 fantasy points in 22 minutes is a really big outing. Imagine we get full complement of minutes, he could have gone for 70. To be perfectly honest, 60. Outside of Fox, like where do you like anyone in this mid tier? There's going to be a lot of people spending down on one particular name, but who would you look at in the mid tier here?
Jeff Teague is interesting. Last day, basically the last game before Derrick Rose comes back. So
Right.
for cash especially, one guy I actually want to ask you about. Just the news just came through. Fred Van Vliet is going to start at shooting guard with Danny Green out, but obviously he's eligible at point guard. So any interest in Van Vliet? I know his price is kind of up from Lowry being out, but starting at shooting guard, what are your thoughts there?
I mean, he started the last game with Lowry, and he still put up 26 fantasy points, which is just over 5x at his current evaluation. So
Hmm.
I think he's a good play. I guess I shouldn't be as nervous about him, like as someone like compared to like a Lowry or a Leonard, because they're probably unlikely to get to their 5x evaluation compared to Van Vliet if this becomes a blowout.
Hmm.
So I would say if Van Vliet is starting, I don't officially have it, but I do believe you. If he is starting, he's I think viable for all formats. That said, I don't think I'm playing him over DeAnthony Melton in cash, just because DeAnthony Melton opens up um, a lot for us.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think I'm with you.
so like I think you can like I would put Van Vliet as a primary tournament play and a secondary cash play. Is that a
Hmm.
fair like evaluation?
Oh yeah, I agree for sure.
Melton averages a fantasy point per minute with Devin Booker off the floor, and I think that's really strong considering he's only 4-1. I mean, we're just looking for 22 fantasy points. We're not looking for anything crazy. He's averaging 20 over his last 6 games, and that's been with Devin Booker in the lineup. So I think DeAnthony Melton's a really strong cash play. I think he's someone you can also fade in tournaments if you want because he's DeAnthony Melton. You know, it's not like we're sitting here and saying, wow, you know, DeAnthony Melton, that guy has had a really strong history of huge games. Like, that's not the
Hmm.
case. He was very good when he first burst onto the scene earlier this year when Isaiah Cannon got waived and it was him or a Kobo and Booker was hurt. But we don't need to force DeAnthony Melton to every lineup we have tonight. I think he is a very safe cash game play that has decent upside that you can play in tournaments for salary relief, but there's a lot of value opening up. So
Hmm.
just to note, Darren Collison and Corey Joseph both playing or both active. So
Okay.
we don't have to worry about playing Tyreek Evans, which is good for the both of us because you were like, yeah, you know, why would we do that? And I was like, oh shit, I really want to play Tyreek. So I'm actually thankful that they're playing. Do you
Hmm.
like any? Who else do you like at point guard, if anyone, or were you ready to move on to shooting guard?
Just really quick, I know we're going to talk about more 76ers going on, but Landry Shamet, you and I were kind of talking about beforehand. Maybe not the most obvious pivot with JJ Redick out, but he might be, just shows you how bad their depth is, but he's probably their best floor spacer with Redick out. So I could definitely play 30 minutes and get some open shots.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, I think is the perfect place to play him because he's free. I mean, if he doesn't pop off, he's a free square. He's $3,500. He's min salary.
Yeah.
So I love it. I think that is off the board. I mean, like I said, I think everyone's going to Furkan, and I don't blame them for cash games at least because they do. He's there to shoot threes because he's there to. This void that JJ Redick left is for somebody to come in and shoot 3-pointers, which is going to be
Uh-huh.
Shamit and it's going to be Furkan. So I think Shamit is a really great call as a contrarian pivot. I'm happy you brought him up. Let's move over to shooting guard. I personally still think Bradley Beal's okay. I know Jimmy Butler defense is scary. I don't think he's the same Jimmy Butler we've seen in years past, especially defensively, especially just as a player, as like a coach's player. Like, who knows if Jimmy Butler's even going to play full complement minutes with all the turmoil he's going
Right.
through? And I mean, he could get pulled at any time. Bradley Beal, 33% usage without John Wall. It's hard to ignore. This was kind of the argument. I remember a slate earlier in the year with Kevin Durant going against Kawhi. It's like, oh, Kawhi, best perimeter defender in the world. But there's no Steph Curry on the floor. There's no Draymond Green on the floor. Durant has the ball in his hands all the time. It's kind of the same situation here. And Durant scored, I think he scored 50 actual points in that game. If it was the overtime game against Toronto. Anyways, it's kind of the same situation here. I'm okay playing Bradley Beal. He comes in really good form, 48 fantasy points over his last 5 games. So I'm
Yeah,
okay with playing him.
it's basically the same Westbrook argument. It's even if he's not efficient,
Right.
he's just gonna the usage rate alone makes him worthwhile.
Right. And he's picking, it's really good to see him picking up the slack that John Wall left, especially in the
Mhm.
assist category, 5 straight games with at least five. Even the rebounds have been up. So that's really nice to see. Going down, I think Victor Oladipo, really nice tournament play. If you think that game stays close, I don't think a lot of people will be on him. And he looked really bad last game, so recency bias, people might just say, we don't need to play Victor Oladipo. But I think he's a little too cheap for at least in my opinion, at least on DK 8.4. I think that's too cheap. Going down, who do we like, Steve? Mid tier. Talk to me about the mid tier. Even talk to me about some value plays if you have any.
Sure. So we're pretty much on all of the Kings tonight.
Right.
You already
Agreed.
mentioned De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Bogdan Bogdanovic. Hield probably more of a GPP,
Yep.
Bogdanovic cash. Um, but Phoenix second night of a back-to-back, losing an hour going to Phoenix. So um, I believe, or yeah, anyway. So those are the two in the mid tier. We had a long discussion. You basically talked me into Dwayne Wade, and a lot of that has to do with rest as well. Denver, second night of back to back, played in Houston last night, and then
Right.
had to fly to Miami. So Dwayne Wade, and he's been completely consistent. If you're not paying close attention, like I kind of wasn't. Um, he earlier in the season it was kind of a good game, a bad game, back and forth, but super consistent the last 5 games, at least 24 fantasy points on FanDuel. So definitely someone you can look at for cash. And then we already kind of mentioned Furkan Korkmaz is he's super chalky, but for good reason. He is starting with Reddick out and should get a bunch of shots with Reddick out.
Yeah, I'm on literally all the same guys. So, I think it could get interesting if Gary Harris were to sit. I think guys like Malik Beasley and
Mhm.
Monty Morris both instantly enter that value conversation. And then I think it's a separate conversation whether we would rather play Malik Beasley slash Monty Morris or a guy like Furkan Korkmaz. I think that becomes a whole nother conversation. I personally probably still lean Korkmaz because they're not playing on second night of back to back, and Philly's had a couple days to just recuperate fully. I mean, they haven't played
Mhm.
in a few days, so I would personally still lean Korkmaz, but I still think that's an argument. If you want to say, hey, Monty Morris looked fantastic last night, he looked better than Jamal Murray, sure. Malik Beasley, 24 fantasy points in 20 minutes or so. So I think that's something that you got to consider as well. But other than that, I think I'm ready to move on to small forward as well. And right at the top, I'm just going to ask you. We got 3 guys right at the top. Rank them in terms of cash. We'll rank them in terms of cash games. Paul George, Kevin Durant, and Kawhi Leonard.
Paul George for sure, number one. It's so tough. I'll say Kevin Durant.
Right.
If you're looking for a reason to play Warriors, this could be a classic game where they just don't take New York seriously and they let them hang in
Agreed.
the game. It's like New York's never really in it, but it's not enough of a blowout
Right.
for Durant to sit the whole fourth quarter. That's totally possible. And I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about Kawhi Leonard other than all the concerns you have with Durant, I think, are equally valid with Leonard as far as the blowout potential being at home against a terrible team. But definitely Paul George number one. Just I just love him
Right.
tonight.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I agree. I think it's the same exact order. And I don't know if those other 2 games stay close. I have more confidence in Minnesota keeping it close than I do
Hmm.
Atlanta or New York on second night of a back-to-back. So I agree. Moving down the list, we have Danilo Gallinari. I think he's safe. I personally think he's a little overpriced. Like, especially when you compare him to like Tobias Harris. I think like I would rather spend the mid sevens for Tobias Harris on the same team than Danilo Gallinari.
Hmm.
TJ Warren is going to be really chalky tonight. I think he's a better play over on FanDuel where he's 6.2 compared to 7.1 on DraftKings. I
Yes.
still think he's a fine play on DraftKings. I'm not sitting here telling you don't play him. I just prefer him on FanDuel where he's cheaper and we have extra salary on FanDuel. So it's like it's just kind of a no-brainer over there. Lock him into cash game on FanDuel. I think he's borderline cash on DK, but it's going to be a lot harder to fit guys like Sabonis in your lineup with a Warren if you're playing like Westbrook or Embiid as well. So I prefer Warren on FanDuel at least tonight. Do you have any interest in, Bojan? Probably no, right, with Corey Joseph. I feel like Bojan would be more valuable if Joseph and Collison were sitting because there's just more
Hmm.
shots to go around. The next guy probably for me is Otto Porter. Do you have any interest in Otto Porter?
Absolutely. Yeah. I know it was meant, the news came in not too long ago that he's going to play, he's on a 30-minute limit, which I think is at his price, 30 minutes is
Right.
plenty. I mean,
Right.
to me, I'd almost rather have that than have no news at all, because at least we know I mean, I can't see if he's on a 30-minute limit. Why would they play him 22 minutes? So if I'm guaranteed 30 minutes of Otto Porter at his price, sign me up all day, every day. He was great last year with John Wall out, and hasn't, is still kind of working his way back. But yeah, I'm all on Otto Porter.
I mean, he gave us 42 fantasy points in 24 minutes, and I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, we're gonna get that type of production at 30 minutes," but
We
they
could.
need another guy. Satoransky's not the scorer that we saw from a couple games ago. Thomas Bryant is still a question mark, and plus he might be out of this game pretty quickly in terms of foul trouble. So Bradley Beal is kind of looking for a Robin right now, and I think Otto Porter just makes sense. Trevor Ariza, stand in the corner guy, very good player, stand in the corner guy. Jeff
Mhm.
Green, who knows what kind of version we're getting of him on a night-to-night basis. So I think Otto Porter is just that guy that becomes a secondary option for them. Moving down the list, who do we like here at small forward? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I think Norman Powell, whether or not he's starting, is one of the best values on the board. He has been excellent lately, and he's worked himself back into the rotation regardless. 5 of his last 7 games, he's played at least 24 minutes. 3 of his last 4. He's just been good too. Like,
Mhm.
do I think the shooting percentages stay this way? No, he's shooting out of his mind, but he's being really efficient. If the efficiency stays half of what it is, he's only 3,800, 3,900 on FanDuel. I think he's a great value tonight.
Yeah, and Paul has the added benefit that if the game is a blowout, he's
He's
probably going
playing.
to be in
Yep,
there anyway. Yeah,
yep.
exactly.
He's playing regardless. So, for me, small forward, I think you could probably make a case for Damian Dotson. I think if we jump back to point guard too, you could probably make a case for like Trey Burke, just because
Mhm.
Frankie Smokes is out, already officially ruled out. We've seen Dotson play 24, 22 minutes his last 2. He's gone over 20 minutes in 4 of his last 5 games. So I think he's an option. I'm not sitting here saying like jam Damian Dotson into your lineups, but I think he's an option. Same with Trey Burke. We know Trey Burke can fill it up really fast whenever he gets time. But other than that, you ready to move on, or you got anyone else for me?
Oh, just real quick, a few names we didn't mention. Kelly Oubre Jr.
Hey,
probably going to be owned more than Norman Powell, but still like him. Still like him a lot. A couple others. Justice Winslow is probably just my fantasy kryptonite, but as I said before, really like Miami at home against a tired Denver team. And then Nemanja Bjelica, as we said, every king is in play tonight, and my guess is he's the least owned out of the Kings starters.
yeah, and the thing is, he's really fairly priced on DK, and we're getting there's no Marvin Bagley tonight either, so there shouldn't be anything in his way. I will say, the other night, 2 games ago, we saw no Marvin Bagley and no Amon Shumpert, and we got 34 minutes of Justin Jackson, and he went for 28 actual and 40 fantasy points. Last night, with everyone healthy, minus Shumpert, but who cares?
Mm-hmm.
With Bagley back, Bjelica in the lineup, Bogdanovich, Justin Jackson still played 27 minutes. So I think Justin Jackson's a viable tournament flyer. I think this game is really interesting, like really, really interesting. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
win people a lot of money, or it's going to lose people a lot of money. I'm playing. We're both seemingly playing a lot of shares of it, so we're hoping that it's the former and it wins a lot of people money, us included. So I think Justin Jackson also in play along with Bjelica. I think they're both fine. I mean, I think there's 6 Kings in play tonight, to be honest, and I think there are probably 6 Suns. As horrible as that sounds, 12 players for one game viable, but I mean, I just think it is what it is tonight. At power forward, not the most stacked position, not
Nope.
the not the it's it's easier on DraftKings because we can put Justin Jackson in there. We could play Sabonis. Both, I think, are the two chalkiest plays at power forward. Just going to get that out of the way. I mean, definitely the two chalkiest plays at power forward. I think Jackson might be the highest owned player on the slate. According to our ownership, he is the highest owned on FanDuel, and he is slightly beat out by his teammate DeAndre Melton on DraftKings in terms of ownership. So, expected chalky Josh Jackson. And then Sabonis is starting. We officially got the word Miles Turner's out. I mean, he's been really, really good, really consistent last 4 games, 38 fantasy points. In his start, 39 fantasy points. As long as he stays out of foul trouble, which I don't necessarily see Tristan Thompson getting him in, he should be fine. Who are some other options you're looking at? I mean, I like Tobias Harris. I think Tobias Harris is in play. He would probably be my favorite play from the Clippers tonight. Him, Gallinari, Lou Williams are all okay. I think Harris is viable for all formats. But who else are you personally looking at tonight at power forward, Steve?
Montrezl Harrell is in play as well, though. Of the two, I think I'm with you. I like Tobias Harris.
Are you scared? Okay, I like Harrell, but are you scared that Marcin Gortat has now played 25 minutes in back-to-back games? And he's eating Harrell's minutes. I agree that Harrell is clearly the better offensive player, and he's realistic. He's just undersized. And against DeAndre Ayton, who, I mean, excuse me, I'm just so stuck on the Phoenix game. I mean, Harrell is way too undersized against guys like Hernan Gomez or Biyombo tonight. So I kind of think Gortat is the guy who sees the majority of the minutes, unless obviously foul trouble occurs. Does that scare you at all? Obviously you're only playing Harrell in tournaments anyway.
Right.
You're playing Harrell in tournaments, so I understand it, and I'm not poo-pooing it all because I know how great of a fantasy producer he is, even in a small amount of minutes. But does that scare you at all?
It does, and it's a fair point. I think he matches up better with Hernan Gomez. Okay. I mean, you could see a straight split where Gortat plays when Biyombo's in the game and Harrell plays against Hernan Gomez. Do you trust Doc Rivers to do anything from one game to the next? So that's why I think it's worth a shot in a GPP. But yeah, your point as far as the recent trends are totally valid.
Okay, I just I just think it's something that needs to be brought to the forefront, especially if there are other people out there, not just you, considering Montrezl Harrell as hey, I want to play Montrezl Harrell. Here's why we do it. Here's why we don't.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
Who else do you like at power forward?
Not a whole lot, but I do like Thaddeus Young. Everyone's going to play Sabonis, and for good reason. But, with Turner out, they really don't have, unless they're going to give Kyle O'Quinn minutes, which they might, but let's hope not. But Thaddeus Young is just super solid. I mean, Cleveland's kind of a terrible team. I don't think for GPP you're going to get a whole lot, but for cash, I think he's as safe as it gets.
Okay. I can get behind that. I do think there is some GPP appeal, but I agree. He's more cashy. One value play I'm just going to throw out there is Dario Saric, and he was popping off in our projections today. If you go over to our projections page, he is currently listed as the top value of the day, and I understand it. Thinking it through, John and I were talking about last night on the podcast where we might want to take a wait and see approach, but the guy's 24 compared to Taj Gibson, who's in his mid-30s. We know what we're going to get out of Gibson. Sarge is still kind of an open book. We saw a really good player last year. We saw a really good fantasy producer when he got minutes. The minutes have been trending in the right direction anyway, 22, 23, 22. At the end of the Thibodeau regime in Minnesota, I could see Sarge getting up to 26, 27 minutes, sub 4K. I think that could be intriguing. I'm not sitting here saying he's a must, but I do think there is some tournament appeal for Sarge under 4K. A guy that we saw last year at times almost at 7K. So I think there is some tournament appeal.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You have to think any coach in his right mind is going to play Dario Saric over Taj Gibson and Anthony Tolliver. And Phillips wasn't in his right mind, and hopefully the new coach is.
I mean, Thibodeau. I mean, Gibson's his guy.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
I get it. It's time to move on. It's time
Hmm.
to see what we have in Dario Saric. That's why we traded, a top 20 player in the NBA, right? We traded him
Yeah.
for not only draft pick, but we traded him for Covington and Saric. These are the guys that need minutes. Moving over to center, you think Joel Embiid's the top player of the slate? I think he's 1B to Westbrook, but I will not fault you at all if you play Joel Embiid over Russ Westbrook. Cannot. Again, if Thomas Bryant does get in foul trouble, which we're all assuming he does,
I think he's
then
already in foul trouble.
yeah, that a boy. I see it. I like it. I like it. So since he's in foul trouble now, they're gonna turn to who? They don't have depth in the front court with Dwight Howard out, with Markieff Morris out, even Markieff Morris, if he played, he's 6'9". So they don't have the depth to stop Embiid. I think this is double-double by half, and it wouldn't shock me to see one of those, classic, like 40 and 10 games from Embiid. He's been in really good form. I think he's 1B to Westbrook, but if you have it the other way, I don't fault you at all. Karl-Anthony Towns has also been in fantastic form. Last 6 games, averaging 68 DraftKings points. Yes, you heard that right. Over the last 6 games, 68 fantasy points. Yes, it's a tough matchup against Steven Adams, but he will be pulling Steven Adams out to the perimeter a little bit more. Steven Adams, yes, he is mobile. He is more athletic than I think people give him credit for. But I think it's just one of those things where Towns is in such a good groove. He has such good usage rate without Derrick Rose on the floor that it's pretty hard to ignore. Another Phoenix guy, I just got to get out of the way. Ayton doesn't get necessarily a huge usage bump with Devin Booker off the floor. But, other than that little blip in the radar against the Clippers where he only took 3 shots, he's been great. Even with that game, in his last 6, 38 fantasy points. And that's including his 14-point dud against the Clippers. So it's a great matchup. The Kings rank out terribly against centers. DVP-wise, they're 23rd. So I think Ayton's an excellent play. Tournaments only for Ayton specifically. Where else are you looking at center, Steve, as our time winds down?
Willie Cauley-Stein,
Yep.
As I said, every king is in play. I believe you mentioned Enes Kanter before, or maybe I'm just thinking of John's starting 5 video from this morning, but should be a good play against the Warriors. The only question is minutes, but he could get you 20 and 10 and only play 22 minutes. So and he's been great his last 3 games. So Enes Kanter is a big guy. And then curious real quick what you think about Bismack Biyombo versus his teammate Hernan Gomez. I'm probably leaning Biyombo for no other reason than the price, but that's kind of an interesting spot for those 2 guys.
So the Kanter thing, we'll touch on both real quick. Kanter, Dave Fizdale has promised however much you want to believe it, he has promised Enes Kanter a role on this team. He promised him minutes. So, we've seen it. Like you said, the minutes have been trending upwards from start at 20 and we at 29 last night. And it's been 30 plus fantasy points all 3. So I think he's pretty secure. It's kind of like the Kevin Knox argument where Kevin Knox is just playing all the minutes regardless of outcome. In terms of upside, I like Hernan Gomez. He's just always been an upside guy, always been a fantasy point per minute guy. Even in the 15 minutes a game he was playing with Cody Zeller there, he's a guy who can give you 30 fantasy points on a given night. That said, if Biyombo's starting, he's the safer play. So I would probably, if it came down to it, I'm probably playing Bismack in cash and I'm playing Hernan Gomez in the tournament. And I do think Kyle Quinn is a thing because that game could blow out. And in 17 minutes, he gave us 30 fantasy points. He's literally like a carbon copy of Hernan Gomez. He can stuff a box score really fast. He doesn't need a lot of time. If you're playing single entries or cash, you don't play O'Quinn. But if you're playing in a large field GPP with 100,000 people, that's where you can take advantage of and you play Kyle Quinn. I think just quickly going back up, I just want to I think Hassan Whiteside could be interesting in tournaments. He has 50 point upside. He has 15 point upside. Jokic played a lot of minutes. He didn't play a lot of minutes, but he was very active in the 29 minutes he played last night.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you mentioned they're traveling across the country to Miami. I think Whiteside, this could be an upside game. And I think Tristan Thompson, if that game can stay close, Indiana 23rd in rebounding this year. We know Tristan Thompson's MO is rebounding second chance points. I think there's a path for Tristan Thompson, who's underpriced, quite frankly. We saw him in the 8Ks earlier in the year when he was smashing every night. So, the minutes, again, on Tristan Thompson are trending upwards. I like him. Gortat's okay. 25 minutes in back-to-back games. I think he's fine as well. Anyone else, Steve?
No, that's it for me.
All right, I think we're done here. We'll both be in subscriber chat leading up until roster lock, which is in 24 minutes from now. And we're there to answer your questions for 24 minutes. We're there to break any news for you guys when it does break. Still waiting on a couple pieces of news. Devin Booker still only doubtful, and the Suns have been very unreliable this year. But for both of us, that does it. Good luck tonight in your contest, and have a good night.
Thanks. Good night.